Happy Sunday morning, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of Flashpoint coming to you from Soundboard at the Motor City Casino, where earlier this week, the Detroit Economic Club hosted a forum for the two Detroit mayoral candidates. I was able to moderate this discussion, which was a one-on-one with each of the candidates for the crowd of business owners and business folks from the Metro Detroit area. Our insiders were part of that crowd, and we are going to break down what we just heard right now on Flashpoint. Joining us for this special edition, CEO Focus Hope, Porsha Roberson. You're already laughing.
I'm already laughing.
I just appreciate you guys being here and hanging around after the event's over. Nolan Finley is the editorial page editor at the Detroit News, and his counterpart at the Detroit Free Press, Nancy Keefer. You guys, thank you for being here and doing this. So we just watched the two candidates, not jointly, but separately here at the Detroit Economic Club. Porsha, what were your thoughts?
You know, I think they both came out and said what they've been saying throughout the campaign. I think Solomon is absolutely trying to make a last-minute push to have people see him sort of as the leader of the future. I think they stuck to their talking points for the most part. There were no new surprises, but we'll see. We've got a few days left, 2, I think, at this point. So,
yeah,
you know, in 3 days, we're going to have a new mayor.
It's late in the game, and I don't know if anything counts as an October surprise, but what were your impressions today, Nolan?
Well, this campaign, I think, has been absent big ideas, and I don't think we heard any big bombshell ideas today about plans for the future of Detroit. I think Sheffield spoke to her audience. She spoke to the business community, and that's a remarkable thing because there's a lot of cities where if you're running for mayor, you can't talk to the business community, you know, and I do credit Kinloch for raising the poverty issue. You know, we've all been sort of riding this high. Detroit's great and Detroit's coming back. But as he pointed out, 51% of our children here live in poverty, and that's not tolerable. And it was good to hear somebody talking about that.
The new 30, I mean, we saw the percentage increase recently, but you put the number on that and it's 223,000 people. It is a lot. Nancy, what did you think about how they did today?
I mean, you know, as these guys have said, it's reiteration of things I've already said before. I have to say, I'd be skeptical of really big, ambitious plans at this point because the reality is Detroit is going to have fewer resources in the future. We've got to figure out how to sustain what we have, what we've done over the past 12 years and build on it. And a candidate who came out swinging with a slate of really ambitious new ideas, I'd give a lot of side eye to. How are you going to do that? How are you going to fund that? That being said, a mayor does have to inspire. They have to have, they can't just be a COO or a just an operations type of person. They have to have a vision to rally people around. I think both of them have articulated different visions that I think are pretty reasonable. I think Sheffield has more operational skills to back that up. And I think Kinloch does have a really important outsider perspective about, you know, what it was like to grow up in poverty and what, just as 51% of kids in poverty is just not acceptable.
Well, I'd take a blueprint that just addressed the upcoming problems that you identify. I mean, what are they going to do when the resources start running? Then what's their ideas for facing those challenges? And we haven't heard a lot of that.
Yeah, I was going to say we should also address that. Right out of the gate, I asked Mary Sheffield just about the article that just dropped in the Free Press.
A column by my colleague, ML Rick.
Yes, and that's what I kind of referred to with an October surprise. Was that anything to move the needle? And for the people who didn't read it, we should point out this is pointing out some donors of hers that, for lack of a better phrase, have a checkered legal history. Mm-hmm. And her answer today, what did you think of her answer about that today?
I mean, you know, I think she said what she is going to say about that and what she needs to say about that. You know, some of the folks identified, one of them has been appointed by Mayor Duggan to multiple boards. He's a big player and developer in Detroit. There are other people who have been connected to this administration or previous administrations. There are players in Detroit who anybody who leaves the city has to work with or work around. And the question is how you manage that relationship. Do you manage it or do they manage you? And whether the mayor has procedures and policies and protocols in place to ensure that decisions are made fairly, because we can't go back to a culture of corruption and backroom dealing and lack of confidence in this city. There are people outside this city who are waiting for any lapse to pounce on as evidence that, oh, Detroit, it's this terrible place. Whoever is our next mayor cannot allow that to happen. But again, being in politics means understanding how your agenda fits in with the agendas of everyone around you and managing it according to your core principles.
And she didn't disavow anyone. And she mentioned her phrase was people deserve second chances.
And I thought that was a great answer. I mean, I think that, yes, people make mistakes. As long as there are processes in place to make sure that they're not managing or controlling in some ways the mayor's office and what happens with the mayor's office, I think, we could run through everybody's campaign contribution list. And I'm sure we would find people who've made mistakes and who now are on the up and up and donating to campaigns. And I don't think a lot of them have given all that money back. So I thought she handled it well. And I don't think it's going to make a big difference in the election.
And we've seen the polls, Nolan. So, I mean, and which we'll talk about. It's an incredibly wide gap if you believe the polls. But press like that, do you think that's enough for some voters to change their mind, thinking Kwame 2.0, for lack of a better?
If you had an opponent who was capable of capitalizing on it, I think it could hurt her. It's late in the campaign. She does have a big lead, but if Solomon Kinloch were in a better position, he should be out there shouting from the rooftops. We have to have zero tolerance for ethical lapses in this city, because we've seen where that can go.
Does anybody feel like anything wildly has changed in the race since? I keep thinking back to the policy conference debate, and it feels like a lot of the messages are the same. Nothing's really changed. And maybe that's because, to be quite honest, if you believe the polls, it hasn't been much of a race.
It has not been much of a race. I think that talking about resources is the thing that I thought would come out more and more, and the lack thereof. I thought that we would drill down on that, because I think it's going to be such a huge issue for the next mayor. Really? I just think that we are all sort of hoping that it's not as bad as I think it's going to be in terms of the lack of revenue, the pension payments that are due, the other things that we're going to have to pay for, that I think it's almost hard to imagine the difference in how Mayor Duggan came into office and what it looked like on the books then, and having a friend in the White House versus what's going to happen for this next mayor with President Trump and that administration, and without the resources that we had been given previously. And I just think that I thought that after the Mackinac Policy Conference and after we narrowed it down to a general election, that would be something that people had real ideas for, because it's going to be brutal.
And there was a gap there after the primary, we should point out. Felt like a void almost for a couple of weeks of just nobody really wanted to take advantage of the situation.
Well, I mean, she did clear the primary with like a 34 percentage point lead. I think that's I got out of the business of making predictions back in 2016, but it's a pretty large lead. And I think there would, as Nolan said, we haven't really seen a lot of evidence that there's this capitalization on any news or any things by Reverend Kinloch to try to close it.
And he's got his own issues and has had his own problems with residency. So the primary, I think that margin of victory did take the wind out of his sails a bit.
Can I also say one other thing that Nolan brought up? We keep referencing the Kwame 2.0. It's not something we did. We've had 3 mayors since Kwame Kilpatrick. And in no other situation have we had the comparison, or at least I don't hear the comparisons about whether Dave Beam was going to be Kwame 2.0 or whether Ken Cockle was going to be. And we certainly didn't hear whether Mike Duggan was going to be the comparison, the Kwame 2.0. Mary's young. She's a Black woman. It gets kind of tired that we're so worried about her becoming Kwame 2.0. She's going to lead the city, or
think it's an unfair attack on her?
I do. I think it's an unfair attack on Detroit, that we can't pick mayors that, yes, we had a mayor who did some terrible things and he paid the price for it, but he's in our past, right? And so it just, as a Detroiter, it gets to be a tired narrative for me, that we are constantly looking at, every young Black person that runs for office, or every, woman that runs for office, or every time we hear, is it going to be Kwame 2.0? Why don't we have those same questions? Why didn't we have him when Mayor Duggan ran? Yeah. Why didn't we think he was going to be Kwame 2.0?
I agree with you, Porsha. And I also, it's frustrating for me as a woman to see, Council President Sheffield has been on council for, 12 years now. She was been council president. She's done a lot of things. She's her People's Platform of Bills. She's advanced a lot of ordinances that people would have said couldn't be done, like right to counsel. But then there's also this contingent that wants to bring up, her family relationships. It's like, do we ask men about their family relationships? Do we ask? Did we say about Councilman Fred Durhal? Did we say, how's your dad, Fred? Who's also a person in politics in the state. No offense to any of the Durhals, who are lovely people, but we don't ask men. We don't assume that men must be influenced and controlled by other men in their lives the way we put that on women. And I think there is, as Porsha said, there's misogyny and racism that is baked into some of these things, and it bothers me as well as a Detroiter and as a woman.
I think we ignore ethical lapses or hints of poor ethical judgment at our own risk, no matter where they come from.
Listen, I don't have any problems with talking about the potential of ethical lapses, but I think it's just the narrative or the conversation around, is it Kwame? Is it Kwame? Is it Kwame?
Well, Douglas came in with a lot of that same scrutiny and speculation from his,
I don't recall that scrutiny.
on his business dealings at DMC, and there was a lot of conversation about his associates there and bringing him in the city. He came in with some scrutiny. It wasn't all, oh gosh.
Scrutiny, yes, and scrutiny is fair, and a mayoral election scrutiny is fair. I'm talking about the comparison where you use Kwame's name as the benchmark by which everybody has to think about how they can't be Kwame. And how about let's make sure we have a good, solid mayor who is ethically sound and who leads the city well.
Absolutely.
And let's be clear about this. Kwame Kilpatrick was sentenced to public corruption for a multi-year, hundreds of millions of dollars bid rigging scheme. The ethical lapses that people are concerned about on the council president's part could be, related to campaign contributions that she accurately reported on disclosure statements. I mean, there's not a comparison here, right? There's not. We shouldn't let ethical lapses pass. We shouldn't indulge them, but we need more meat to something before we compare. Someone taking a campaign contribution.
I'm also just tired of hearing Kwame Kilpatrick.
From folks who are regular political.
Remember, that started with a little small spark and ended up, 60 million bucks
Well, the original
in
question,
somebody's pocket.
the original question probably answered itself by saying, hey, most of Detroiters at this point, if the polls are right, do not believe that answer as dismissive as you are.
Dismissive. She's not dismissive. We're not. Nobody's saying like you should over. Sorry, Jason, you don't believe that. But it's contextualizing.
Yeah. So, does anybody have a prediction, a numbers prediction in this? We've seen the polls. You've seen the candidates. What do you think is going to happen on Tuesday?
Well, I hope people come out to vote, because oftentimes when you're seeing 30 and 40 point margins, people say, well, I don't need to come out. And, there are other races on the ballot, some very important council races. So I hope people will come out, but I think this thing's done for Sheffield.
Yeah, I agree. I think the biggest concern I have is, one, there are other elections that are as important as mayor. The mayor's only as good as they have a great council around them to really lift up what the things that they want to do. But my biggest fear is that people stay home, that we continue this sort of idea that because she looks as if she's going to win big, that people don't need to come out and vote. And that facilitates the later elections, a gubernatorial election next year, where people sort of dismiss Detroit because Detroiters, the narrative becomes Detroiters don't vote.
Which I kind of think that's the stepping stone of her success, by the way, Nancy. A lot of people in a recent poll have a much different view of the city council and the mayor's office as they did 12, 13, 14 years ago. And, well, that's a natural ascension for Mary Sheffield.
Yeah, I thought one of the key turning points in the 2009 election, the first one, Bing versus Cockrell, was during a debate when former Mayor Bing, then candidate Bing, turned to Ken Cockrell and said, the city council was as big of a problem as the mayor's office, and you led that. And at the time, that just felt like a very damning statement, and it just felt like the moment when the race turned. And that is such a world away now. That council is a very different place. It's no one has called anyone Shrek. No one has pulled any other sorts of antics, and it's a very collegiate, professional, functional body. And that is, so for one council president, again, sort of tarred by association back in 2009 to another council president who can say, look, I led that as a as a point of pride.
Well, let me echo what Nolan said, and everybody, no matter what you're thinking, go to the poll and make sure your vote is heard on Tuesday. We're going to dive into some more topics with our insiders here right after this on Flashpoint. Back here on Flashpoint with our panel as we are at the soundboard here at Motor City Casino today. If it looks different, that's because it is. This was taped on Thursday as the two mayoral candidates went one last time around in their forum here. We got to see that. We just discussed that. But let's dive into who those two candidates aim to replace, and that's Mike Duggan in the governor's race. It feels like there was a lot of news in the governor's race. This feels like it's starting to get going now. Nolan, let me start with you.
Okay.
A couple of polls show that Mike Duggan, both in Detroit and statewide, is pulling evenly from Republicans and Democrats. Is that a good sign that he's doing well, or is it just right now way too early to?
I think for an independent candidate whose constituency has been primarily Southeast Michigan, the polls are very positive for him. I think the most significant poll was the one we did, Detroit News and WDIV, of Detroit voters. And he was picking some up somewhere in the area of 45, 46% of Detroit voters. And, you know, this is a 90% Democratic city. If he can take 45% of the vote out of Detroit, a Democrat doesn't have a chance of winning statewide. If he can add to that significant numbers outstate, where he'll head the day after he leaves the Manoogian mansion, I think it's, you know, if I were him reading these polls, I'd feel very good at this point.
Nancy, that's got to be a lot of work to do outstate getting those voters, because we know the further away you get from Detroit, the worse the opinion of the city is.
Yeah, in a Glenn Garif poll back in May, I think they found that he had like an 86 bajillion approval rating in Detroit. I think it was 86%, but I can't remember exactly.
Yeah.
And in outstate, it was like 7%.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I also take a slightly different view of this most recent poll. He got 44% support in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
He's been mayor here for 12 years and didn't crack 50%. Like, he's not going to get more popular once he leaves office.
But again, I don't think Jesus could convince Detroiters. I don't think Jesus could convince such a Democratic city to abandon their party.
Yeah, well,
that's a big ask.
I don't know. He's got great hair.
We'll see. We'll see what happens when it's actually time to go to the voting booth, because it is still really early. But
on everything.
Outstate, a lot of people still consider Detroit a toxic brand, and is he going to be able to convince those people that it's not? I mean, I hope so, because it's good for Detroit if they don't think that. But you know,
I think that's less true now than it was even
7% approval rating outstate
for Duggan, but not for the city of Detroit.
Well,
I think that has changed markedly.
I guess I just think that if the approval rate for Detroit was so great out of state, he would do even better for in the polling out there. And so I just don't think that. I think that the heavy lift is going to be out of the city of Detroit. I'm not surprised by the numbers in Detroit, of course. I mean, he's done a great job in Detroit, right? And people know him in Detroit. But when you get out of Detroit, I was in Petoskey a week ago. Like, when you get out of here, you know, people don't know who Mike Duggan is.
He knows that. That's why you see all those billboards.
Right. And they do know who Jocelyn Benson is.
Right. Now I want to talk about her as well, because she's leading the way, at least with Democrats when it comes to fundraising. I think the number I saw was Cox, John James, Jocelyn Benson, Duggan, in the most recent period for fundraising. But Nolan, she's got this nagging problem with the GOP that won't let the voter rolls issue go. Do you see that as a problem she needs to dismiss to get out of the way before she can get some momentum going?
You know, I think she's got a lot of problems beyond that. I mean, she's been there 8 years. There's a certain weariness with government right now. People don't feel government is working all that well. And, you know, I don't think she's going to have the ability to excite voters. Her party, you know, a lot of her party is going to go to Duggan. I wouldn't dismiss entirely Garland Gilchrist, who will appeal to the progressive voters in that party who tend to show up in primaries and make a difference.
We should point out that those polls we just mentioned didn't include Garland Gilchrist. It was always Benson on the Democratic side, so that goes with that. And Nancy, when you look at the governor's race, you feel like Gilchrist is being pushed aside, or what stands out the most with this race at this point?
You know, he's lagging in fundraising, but he is the lieutenant governor to an incredibly popular governor. This is, some folks made the comparison to Kamala Harris when he entered the race, to Kamala Harris running after Joe Biden, who was not popular. The difference there is Garland Gilchrist's boss is very popular. People love Gretchen Whitmer. She has this huge, massive TikTok loyal following of people who aren't even really engaged in politics and who probably aren't watching Flashpoint, but have probably watched her videos on TikTok.
But she's not endorsing him at this point, too.
Well, we'll see what happens. I think a lot of this hinges on her, and also how he walks the line of associating himself with the Whitmer administration versus as his own man. It's a very difficult line to walk. You don't want to be, I'm just more of the same. You have to be your own person. But at the same time, again, she has a very popular brand among Democratic voters in this state. So there are opportunities there and risks.
He has an opportunity to stand apart right now. There's some issues going on with the MEDC and her overseas trips. Porsha, do you think he should stay aligned to cultivate that, or maybe take the opportunity to say, hey, out of the shadow?
I think this is the opportunity for him to stay and make his own case for why he should be governor. I think that, that was one of the things that, Kamala Harris certainly struggled with, is that was separating herself somewhat from Joe Biden. And because she didn't, I think that's one of the reasons people, even some Democrats, were concerned about the direction she was going to take the country in. I don't know if that's a valid argument, but it was the argument that people made. I think this is a prime opportunity for Garland to make the case about what he's going to do as governor of the state of Michigan, despite the fact that he's worked with a very popular governor and they've done some incredible things for the state of Michigan, but it's his time to make his own case.
I thought we mentioned the polls and how it was good news for Duggan, Nolan. I found it interesting that Benson's campaign leaked internal polls that showed her killing the Democratic competitors.
And she probably is. That's not
it's possible.
It's not a very strong
Is
field.
that telling at all to you when someone leaks the internal polls, like they need to do that? Or
it's common practice.
Yeah.
I mean, particularly when they make you look good. I'm interested on the Republican side. They had a debate this week, and John James didn't show up again. And he's apparently adopted this idea or this attitude that he's so far in front of that field. In Donald Trump fashion, he doesn't have to debate. I think that one's going to bite him in the bottom.
That's right. Democrats don't even want him right now. Like, Republicans didn't even want him to run for governor. So how does he have this impression that he's so popular?
Well, that's the big question. But I think hiding is not a good strategy in a field that has other qualified candidates.
And they all took aim at him at that.
And they should.
Yeah.
You should not be able to dodge the public, dodge the press, dodge debates, and just assume you can win the nomination or deserve the nomination.
Particularly when John James has run statewide twice, or the Senate twice, or twice, and it was not successful, and then was able to win a House district, which is a much, much different prospect than a statewide election.
And now is putting that seat at risk, which is why, as Porsha said, a lot of Republicans aren't really happy.
To see in Macomb County, the Republicans are struggling to find somebody to run out there that they think can keep that seat. From my understanding, Trump wasn't ready to endorse him and didn't really encourage him to run for governor. They wanted to keep that seat, and he decided, nope, I'm going to go out there and declare I'm running for governor. Third time might be the last time that we sit down.
And there's a very strong Democratic candidate emerging in that district too, Christina Hines, who is a really interesting person who people should watch.
I'm going to leave it there. There are thoughts from our insiders on both the mayor's race, the gubernatorial race. We'll get back to normal in the studio next week. Guys, thanks so much. Always a pleasure. Coming right back. We'll tidy up this episode right after this. On election night, don't forget to join us on Local 4. We're going to break down all the results as they come in. That's going to do it for Flashpoint this week. Meet the Press coming up next. See you later.